Oscars used to be the Super Bowl for movie fans, but it seems as of recently they're more the butt end of a series of jokes. Every year the ratings seem to be declining lower and lower, and there's even rumors this year that a bunch of advertisers are very skittish about how low the numbers are going to drop. But it wasn't always this way, and I think there's several things causing it. So let's talk about it. Hi, if you're stopping by for the first time, my name is SeanChandler, and I started this channel essentially because I was driving everyone around me crazy talking about movies way too much. If you can relate, you're probably in the right place and consider clicking that subscribe button. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down in the comment section. Answer these two simple questions. Do you care about the Oscars? Why or why not? Let's have a nice, lively, yet respectful conversation. I know people are going to have strong opinions because some people are totally burned out and don't care at all, and some of you still love the Oscars. Let's talk about our differences of opinions in a nice, respectful fashion. All right, to get started, to understand what's going on with the Oscars, you have to think about three different groups of people. First off, you've got Hollywood, the filmmakers, the actors, that group of people that makes up the voting group that is the Academy. Second, you have cinephiles. These are movie lovers with a little bit more prestigious tastes in films. Third, the general public, the mass audiences of people that go and buy the movie tickets. They are the ones that keep the entertainment industry working and continuing to be an industry that makes enormous amounts of money. And while each of these groups certainly have their different preferences in the mix, there was a point in time where there was a certain amount of overlap where all three groups could agree that certain films were great films. I think back to kind of my formative years when I was first starting to love movies back in the 90s. And I think back to like 1994 when you had Pulp Fiction, Shawshank Redemption, Forrest Gump getting nominated for Best Picture. These are films that the general audience loves, as well as got great reviews and were nominated for Best Picture. You think about 1995, Braveheart. I'm in the 8th grade. It's this movie. I'm excited to go see this movie as in, like, my mom finally lets me go see this big, violent, epic film, but it was also nominated for Best Picture. There was overlap between the three groups when it came to certain films and the definition of what is a great film. Because of this, general audiences were interested in the Oscars because they had seen the movies nominated for Best Picture, and they had a reasonable expectation that a film that they had seen could win Best Picture. Therefore, ratings were high. But somewhere around the turn of the century, around 15-ish years ago, there seemed to be a shift away from these films that we all agreed were great films, more towards films that Hollywood thought were important films. In fact, the Hollywood Reporter each year does a little secret anonymous interview with a voter for the Academy. You kind of get what their thinking process is. And this is something that one of them said just this past week. I prefer to reward a movie that is solid and has something of social importance to say, like BlacKkKlansman. So because of this, the overlap between the general audience and the other two groups started to shrink, and they started to pull apart in their own directions. And the more that Hollywood leaned into important films rather than films that all of us agreed were great, the general audience had seen fewer and fewer films and became less and less interested in watching the Oscars. So as years passed, ratings kept dropping lower and lower and lower. Likewise, over the last 15 years, the political climate in the country has grown more and more divisive and polarizing. Hollywood is known to be to the left. And so if they're nominating films that they find important, that also means they're nominating films that are probably more divisive and polarizing. Case in point, the full quote from the anonymous Oscar voter said this: "I prefer to reward a movie that is solid and has something of social importance to say, like BlacKkKlansman. The Charlottesville footage at the end of it sealed the deal for me. It reminds us that things really haven't gotten better." That's a very strong statement that some people would agree with and a lot of people would disagree with, and that disagreement tears people apart because it's divisive and polarizing by nature. So some people don't tune in because they haven't seen the movies. Other people don't tune in because they don't want to be politically lectured for 4 hours. Because of all of this, the ratings continue to drop lower and lower. But it seems like the Academy is getting the entirely wrong message from all of this and don't understand what's going on, so they're treating symptoms rather than dealing with the disease. They're not dealing with the underlying reason that people are less interested in their show. But because it is an award show, they have to try and keep the ratings up, so they've been experimenting with all sorts of ideas that are very superficial, like trying to get younger and hipper hosts. So about 10 years ago, they had James Franco and Anne Hathaway host, and it was awkward, it wasn't funny, it felt out of place. Then about 5 years ago, they had Seth MacFarlane hosted, and he came out and sang a song called "We Saw Your Boobs." Just stop and think about how weird that is, that's what they thought would get people to watch. They take an award show that doesn't seem to be appealing to the broad audiences, and they think if we sprinkle on some Seth MacFarlane and his boob humor on top of it, then people will want to watch the Oscars. If you just put a little James Franco in the mix, suddenly people will want to watch a 4-hour award show. That's really weird thinking that if you bring in lowbrow humor, it'll get people to watch a prestigious awards show. It's entirely superficially dealing with a deeper issue. And of course, both of those shows had some pretty harsh feedback, and it leads to a point in time where nobody wants to host the Oscars. That leads us to this year, where it's been like a non-stop string of Oscar debacles for about 9 months now. So a while back, they announced, we're going to have a most popular film category. So in an effort to try and get the masses to watch it, they decided to try and pander to them by throwing them a bone and having the popular film category, which no one in the general public was like, oh, as long as they have that category, I'll go ahead and watch the Oscars. And the cinephiles are thinking, why are you degrading our awards show by throwing in most popular film? It's like clearly they understood the masses aren't watching it, so let's try and get them to watch it by putting this category in. They understand that's where the disconnect is, but they came up with this horrible, superficial solution to the problem. Of course, they got an immediate backlash from people and they canceled this decision. Then they decided to cut forward the categories from being announced during the live show to try and shorten it a little bit, because they thought that if they cut those 4 categories, suddenly the show would be short enough that general audiences would want to watch it, which of course, once again, immediately the cinephiles are like, what are you doing? This is an award show for prestigious films for people that love movies. Why would you dishonor the best editor, the best cinematographer by doing this? Rightfully so. So once again, the backlash happens. The Academy backs off of this because they're misunderstanding entirely what the core problem is, and they're superficially trying to find solutions. And then you just have the entire Kevin Hart fiasco, where he's asked, says that he will host it, and then people get mad over things that he said 10 years ago, which once again goes back to the politically divisive nature of our country, where one group of people goes, why did they ask this guy that would say such horrible things? And the other group of people goes, he said it 10 years ago, why are we talking about this just now? And it's one more thing that just kind of puts a bad taste in your mouth when you think about the Oscars this year. And that leads me to the actual Best Picture nominees, which are pretty bizarre this year. It just feels like they're trying to appease every possible group of people that might watch the show, whether it's comic book movie fans, people that love biopics, people that love musicals, people that want something political, people that want something a little bit artsy. All of it's thrown into the mix. And even 2 of these movies that were nominated for Best Picture received very mixed reviews from the critics. Bohemian Rhapsody is right around 60% on Rotten Tomatoes, but it's a crowd pleaser. Audiences loved it, so it gets nominated. Vice is a movie, once again, it's like in the 60% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's not a movie that a lot of people loved all that much, but it's highly political, which is Hollywood, so it gets nominated. It's a weird set of movies where there's no front runner. I don't see any logic, rhyme, or reason. I have no idea who will win tonight. I don't know who should win tonight. I have no idea what is going to happen with the Best Picture category. So where does that leave us? Well, the general public haven't seen a bunch of the films. They don't want to be lectured by Hollywood, and the cinephiles are annoyed that the Academy keeps pandering to the lowest common denominator and degrading this awards show. So there's no one left to be excited about the Academy Awards anymore as they currently stand. And the Academy is desperately trying to appeal to the masses by sprinkling entertainment on top of the ceremony, but that's not what the masses want. They want an award ceremony celebrating the films that they've actually seen. And that's not really what the Academy is right now. I think the Academy really needs to reboot. They need to go back to their core and decide what they're actually about. Is this just about trying to do a TV show that gets ratings with the masses trying to watch it? Or is it about celebrating what they think are the best and most important films? What you can't do is have a ceremony about films that the masses haven't seen and pander to them to get them to watch it. That isn't working. It's just burning bridges and it's embarrassing themselves. They need to figure out what they want this to be, stick to it, have a focus, and do the best version of that, not this hybrid abomination embarrassment that it's been as of recently. So that's my theory as to what's going on with the Oscars. Tell me, do you care about the Oscars? Why or why not? Down below in the comments section. Let's have a nice lively discussion. Thank you so much for watching and keep talking movies too much.